Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribhara Dhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Giribhara Dhari. Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yashodanandana Braja Janarandana. Yamuna Tira Panachari. Yamuna Tira Panachari. Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Radha Madhava. Jai Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रवचकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्रीमती श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रवचकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर शत श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर श्री प्रभुपाद की आनंद कोटि वैष्णविंद की नामचर्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तविंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोविंद श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की मथुरा धाम की गंगा माई की यमुना माई की तुलसी देवी की भक्ति देवी की समवेत भक्तवृंद की all glories and devotees Hare Krishna, all glories and devotees Hare Krishna, all glories and devotees Hare Krishna, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Yat Nabhi Padma Bhavanat Aham Asam Idya Lokatraya Upakaranah Yat Anugrahena Tasmai नमः ते उद्धरस्त भवाय योग निद्रावसान विकसत नलिनेक्षणाय यन्नाभिपद्मभवनादहमासमीड्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्त भवाय योग निद्रावसाना विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय यन्नाभिपद्मभवनादहमासमीड्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्त भवाय योग निद्रावसाना विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय यन्नाभिपद्मभवनादहमासमीड्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्त भवाय योग निद्रावसाना विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय
लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय योग निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय योगा निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय यन्नाभिपद्मभवनादहमासमीड्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय योगा निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय यन्नाभिपद्मभवनादहमासमीड्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय योगा निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय यन्नाभिपद्मभवनादहमासमीड्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय योगा
निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय भवनादहमासयेद्य भवाय योगा Okay, Mataji's. Nama Padma Samedya
तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय
Yoga
निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय
यन्नाभिपद्मभवनादहमासमेढ्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय योगा निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय यन्नामनादहमासमेढ्य लोकत्रयोपकरणो यदनुग्रहेण तस्मै नमस्त उदरस्थ भवाय योगा निद्रावसान विकसन्नलिनेक्षणाय yet whose Nabhi, navel, Padma, lotus, Bhavanad, from the house of Aham, I, Asam, become manifested. Idya, O worshipable one, Lokatraya, the three worlds, Upakaranaha, helping in the creation of, yet whose Anugrahena, by the mercy, Tasmai, unto him, Namaha, my obeisances, Te, unto you, Udarasta, situated within the abdomen, Bhavaya, having the universe, Yoga Nidra Avasana, after the end of the transcendental sleep, Vikasat, blossoming. Naline Kshanaya, unto him whose opening eyes are like lotuses. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. My object, object of my worship, I am born from the house of your lotus navel for the purpose of creating the universe by your mercy. All these planets of the universe are stationed within your transcendental abdomen while you are enjoying sleep. Now your sleep having ended, your eyes are open like blossoming lotuses in the morning. Purport. Brahma is teaching us the beginning of Archana, regulation for morning 4 o'clock to night 10 o'clock. Early in the morning, the devotee has to rise from his bed and pray to the Lord. And there are other regulatory principles for offering Mangala Arati early in the morning. Foolish non-devotees, not understanding the importance of Archana, criticize the regulatory principles, but they have no eyes to see that the Lord also sleeps by His own will. The impersonal conception of the Supreme is so detrimental to the path of devotion service that it is very difficult to associate with the stubborn non-devotees, who always think in terms of material conceptions. Impersonalists always think backwards. They think that because there is form in matter, spirit should be formless. Because in matter there is sleep, in spirit there cannot be sleep. And because the sleeping of the deity is accepted in Archana worship, the Archana is Maya. All these thoughts are basically material. To think either positively or negatively is still thinking materially. Knowledge accepted from the superior source of the Vedas is standard. Here in these verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, we find that Archana is recommended. Before Brahma took up the task of creation, he found the Lord sleeping on the serpent bed in the waves of the water of devastation. Therefore, sleeping exists in the internal potency of the Lord, and this is not denied by pure devotees of the Lord like Brahma and his disciplic succession. It is clearly said here that the Lord slept very happily with the violent waves of the water, manifesting thereby that he is able to do anything and everything by his transcendental will and not be hampered by any circumstance. The Mayavadi cannot think beyond this material experience, and thus he denies the Lord's ability to sleep within the water. His mistake is that he compares the Lord to himself, and that the comparison is also a material thought. The whole philosophy of Mayavad school, based on not this, not that, neti, is basically material. Such thought cannot give one the chance to know the Supreme Personality Godhead as He is. Om Jnanati Marandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunjana Tasmai Shri Guru Namah Shri Chaitanya Manavashtam Sthapitam Bhutale Swayam Rupakatamam Supatantika Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapatakalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagar Chatam Sagaran Raghunathan Vedamtam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savatitam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagaran Alita Shri Vijakan Vitam Shri He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinam in the Jagatpade Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Navasati Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavane Shri Vrishabhanu Sati Devi Pranamami Vanchakalpatarubhyaścha kripasindhubhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vikasa Swami Iti Namine. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharni Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarnya. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jnanananda Mayam Deva Nirmash Pratikakrit Madaram Sarva Vidyanam Haigrima Upasmahe. Guru Vaishnava Bhagavan Tinir Smarana Hoy Vigna Vinashana Naya Hoy Nijavachita Purana. Okay, here Srila Prabhupada directly criticizes the impersonalists. Here, although the verse particularly may not mention anything about that, Srila Prabhupada addresses this here, the form of the Lord. How Brahman is able to see the form of the Lord after such a long austerity that he has performed. But so many of the impersonalists deny it under the material conception. And Srila Prabhupada specifically saying that his mistake is that he considers the Lord to be similar to himself. And actually the whole world more or less runs on these conceptions under the directions of modes of material nature. That we accept the conception of God or the conception of... You can't hear? But it's not audible?
It goes up and down.
Oh, I don't like it here, that's the thing. Okay. So the conception of God, even in different religions, in itself is under the modes of material nature. So that we see that even the conception of the supreme being, some say, well, he doesn't even have a form, as the Muslims do, and as the Christians do, it's just another material conception that he is very old, so he has a beard. And so due to this, they put certain limitations upon God according to their own circumstances, according to how their own body works. So it is simply a material conception, but because they can't imagine or they can't actually see God or understand God, then they have to concoct some idea from their own experience. And so Srila Prabhupada says that all of these understandings, they're material, specifically pointing towards the impersonal conception of God here. But the idea that because I'm like this, he must be like that. Because when I get old, I develop a beard and I become some grumpy old man. Also, the God also must be like that. He must be probably more grumpy. So he's probably very hard-hearted. Generally, sometimes when if you're old and grumpy, if you met old grumpy people, sometimes they're pretty rough. So God also must be like that, so he'll send it to hell forever. And so the idea is generally, it's an extension of ignorance. Being in a material conception of life altogether is ignorance itself. And there may be different extents of it. There may be a level of goodness, just as the three modes of material natures. They fight amongst each other, you could say. There's a competition. So even within the level of ignorance within material life, there is goodness there. So sometimes that goodness is also exhibited. You see, like certain, even the Mayavadis, their way of life, and the real Mayavadis, is so much in the mode of goodness. Like they only eat in a particular way, they wake up at a particular time, they're very strict with their schedule, they don't eat salt, they're very what they eat is very sattvic. Their body is generally very sattvic, very healthy. They do a lot of this yoga, Ashtanga yoga, different process of realizations. But overall, in understanding the real position of the jiva, they're in complete ignorance. Similarly, we see that even within modern society. Sometimes we see it, there's people, a lot of people in this world that may be even healthier than devotees, or even, you could say in some sense, also sometimes more in the mode of goodness than even devotees sometimes. But overall, their conception of life, or understanding of what is matter, what is spirit, there is no idea of that. There is no question of it in spirit, actually, even understanding that even to some extent. And if you ask people in general what the idea of spirit is, it's generally complete hodgepodge material conception to some extreme. It's not anything particularly spiritual, or the proper understanding of what is spiritual. So people can't think beyond themselves. And you'll see that generally because of the impersonal, when there's impersonal understanding or a material understanding, it's generally it's a self-centered idea. So because I'm like this, it must be like that. Because we are like that as a nation, as a country, identifying as different on the different levels of the body, it generally leans towards being selfish. So even conception of God is centered around the self. That I'm like this, so God must be like that. It's primarily centered around the self. And it creates so much problems because of this impersonal understanding, as Srila Prabhupada says, that it's actually impersonalists, they're very difficult to deal with. The devotees of the Lord, they don't want to deal with them. What does he exactly say here? He says that they're very difficult to associate with, that it's so detrimental to the path of devotional service that it is very difficult to associate with the stubborn non-devotees who always think of in terms of mature conceptions. Because why? Because they're very selfish. You see, impersonalists, Mayavadis are generally very selfish. So, and we can understand that generally those who are in ignorance are very selfish. A child is very selfish. When you see a child, the only thing the child cares about is mine. It's like, as long as nothing else matters but what he gets and the happiness that he develops. Okay, get the keys, like, he just wants the keys for why? What does he need the keys for? Just something that sounds good to him. It's pleasing to the child's senses. But he doesn't care that, well, the parents might have to, take the car and go somewhere and, go shopping so I can eat my next meal. He doesn't care about that. He doesn't have a conception of that because of his ignorance and his inability to understand the larger picture. He doesn't see that by my doings that another person is impacted. He sees, I only care about my happiness, everything else doesn't matter. And that we see that pretty much prevalent in modern society also. That for the animals, we impersonalize them in order to kill them because ultimately our happiness is what matters, how my body is nourished and how good that food that I raise tastes. So, due to not understanding one's position and in relation to others in an impersonal concept of life, that's also impersonal, that one is not able to understand how one's action impacts others around him also. Due to this impersonal conception of life, there's so many problems, and therefore Srila Prabhupada's pranam mantra is like that is largely come to the West to destroy this impersonalism and voidism. Because it's actually the source of all problems, because at root is ignorance, considering the self as center of everything. So we see that even within our own lives. Sometimes we're living in a situation, generally Vasudeva Kutumbakam, that actually we consider the whole world our family. Actually every living entity is related to the Lord, and that's how devotees of the Lord see. It's very personal, isn't it? Everybody's we're looking at everyone not as a product of exploitation, but as a devotee of the Lord or as servants of the Lord. Whereas the material conception of life, impersonal conception of life, is I'll take what I can get from you and that's it. That's it. Okay, after I get what I want from you, then you no longer need to exist in my reality. Because there's no point, there's no use of it anymore, so okay, forget it. So we see that even in our own lives, there's different levels of impersonalism, that we only considered my life, okay, my service, and my particular situation. I only need to think about that, not about the greater good or the greater situation that is there. So just like sometimes a need may arise for us to be able to serve under, but because of we sometimes when that need arises, we undergo so much turmoil in our mental state because we're back to that standard of, okay, my service, okay, what's going to happen to my service, me, myself, what about me, what is my situation? That is natural, as Srila Prabhupada writes in many places. Generally, living into, we're fearful of our own situations, of our non-existence. But he also writes that when one comes to, or he also indicates, or the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is that when one comes to devotional service, that fear of non-existence disappears, as Prahlad Maharaj prays to Lord Nrsimhadev, as when I approach you, my Lord, and I see you, there's no more fear. There's no fear of existence. There's no more fear of non-existence. So sometimes we see that because of the fear of non-existence, my service not existing, or a circumstance that may come about in which we can't serve in that particular way we want sometimes, there's some anxiety created or a desire not to serve sometimes. Okay, I'll just do what I want to do. And that creates so many difficulties sometimes within even devotional life, that we'll see that in different places, even where I've come from, everybody wants to do their own thing, and then so there's no move towards actually performing devotional service in the way that we see in places like Vrindavan, in which all the Brajavasis are working together to serve Krishna, are actually assisting, like the gopis are assisting each other to serve Krishna, are engaging others in service of Krishna. So sometimes that happens, that even sometimes it becomes impersonal, that okay, my service and my particular thing, and then we neglect the greater society, that there may be other things that we have to attend sometimes and put things on pause. Just like the child doesn't care about putting the keys on pause, and then just wants to take it and it's like, okay, this is my happiness, this is my service, this is my happiness, I don't care about anything else. It may throw things off. So due to an impersonal conception of life, things actually become turbulent even within devotional society, because it's present in our lives. And you see that when that understanding is there of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, that this is a family, that actually this is a family that's working together, not out to exploit each other, but actually to help each other and help each other serve better in one's devotional service, then we see generally a well-oiled machine, as said, that everybody plays their part and knows how to play their part and is willing to help others play that part also. So the living entities are generally, naturally, because they're naturally means become so conditioned in this unnatural state, it's become practically their natural state of selfishness or looking away from Krishna and Krishna's family. Krishna means Krishna's whole entourage, not just me and Krishna and my service to the spiritual master or my service to the deity or Krishna himself. That is actually seen as a largely whole, just like we're all here serving together in Maharaj's project. And there's different aspects of Maharaj's project, and we're all in here in this room serving in different aspects of Maharaj's project. Within the project, there's different departments. And so each department has to work with each other, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work. Just as recently Maharaj was telling us that I don't want a business. This is a family. That actually this should be run in a mood of a family, in which everybody's seeing each other as brothers and sisters, not as competitors. So a devotee needs to be cognizant, not impersonal, to the situations that altogether the family is in. Not that the devotee becomes impersonal and thinks only me, only my service. What is the need of the family? And the family, just like one is situated sometimes, even within, in normal life, generally one has to do things that he doesn't want to do. He doesn't feel like he wants to do. But nonetheless, one does it for the service of the family, just like the father sometimes doesn't want to go to work, or doesn't want to do work, or a particular type of work, but because he needs to maintain his family, he has to go and do that. And he derives satisfaction out of seeing that family come up, not maybe that personal satisfaction of him working, just like when we were in this Homestead Heritage Conference, this nice mother, she was saying that even though modern society pushes forward this idea that a woman is not, is less if she just takes care of her kids and loves them and raises them properly, that she's less, she needs to do more. She's finding that by her sacrifice of giving that idea up, that actually she's finding great satisfaction within that sacrifice. That, okay, I'm giving my life to my children. That, okay, I'm giving my own personal ideas up. I have my own ideas of what to do. But for the greater good of the family, one may even give up that personal, even within devotional life, sometimes one may have a service that he's very attracted to. He may give that up even sometimes for the greater good of the family, greater good of the movement. Nonetheless, Krishna is so kind that Krishna never, when that devotee has a desire to perform a particular type of service, he always will make arrangement to bring that devotee back to that service. That is the beauty of Krishna consciousness, very different from material life, is that when one becomes selfless in his attitude of service, Krishna rewards that devotee with so much, he becomes so surprised. Like, wow. When he gives up his selfish attitude of life and surrenders to the need of the hour or the particular service that is required, giving up his own conceptions, even within devotional service, then he is rewarded by the Lord in ways that one cannot even imagine. As we see so many times with Dhruva Maharaj, with Prahlad, with so many other devotees of the Lord throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, that they gave up their personal desires. They gave up their personal desires. Dhruva Maharaj, he gave up his personal desire to enjoy. Bali Maharaj, he gave up his personal desire to enjoy. The gopis themselves, they gave, they gave everything up. They give up even the idea of, this Aishwarya Bhav to Krishna. That, Krishna, he wants the dust of the feet of the gopis. Well, generally, even they consider Krishna their husbands. You may not even, how can you give the dust of your feet to your husband? It's ridiculous. But because they knew that it would cure, help Krishna, that they're thinking like that, okay, forget it. All right, give that conception up to serve that. But the level of bliss and level of ecstasy they were in, and how close they became to Krishna is unimaginable. So, due to an impersonal conception of life also, even within devotional service, we can get away from Krishna. Even though performing service, sometimes that service, because we may take a material conception within that service sometimes, not that, of course, it is all beneficial, not that one loses anything within devotional service, but the different grades, as one surrenders unto me, I shall reward him accordingly. So, one can surrender to the Lord like that. But the Mayavadis themselves, there is no question of that for them at all. They can't even understand the personal conception of the Lord because of their neti. Not this, not that. It's not a descending process, it's an ascending process for them. There's no idea that, because I sleep, in the spiritual realm, there must be no sleep. Because sleep in this material world is ignorance, as it's pretty clear in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and even in our lives, you can't do anything, you're just stagnant, you have no control. It's pretty useless thing to do. Sleep is just like it's just like 6 hours, 8 hours of your day just wasted away. It's like, what are you doing? Nothing but laying there the whole time. That's all it is. You're just lying there. But just because the living entity, influenced by the modes of mature nature, is under that particular circumstance, they consider, well, if there's sleep, there must also be ignorance also. So they have no idea of the understandings of the proper principles of spiritual life. Therefore, it is just, as Prabhupada says, like material, or here he says that is basically material. Because it is somewhat getting away from some idea of being material, but at the same time, it doesn't have a full conception of what is spiritual. So there's actually nothing, it hasn't escaped that realm of what is considered material. Therefore, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we see that here, by the prayers of the demigods, O Lord, cause of all causes, if your transcendental body were not beyond the modes of mature nature, one cannot understand the difference between matter and transcendence. So here in this particular translation is saying that if you are not beyond the modes of mature nature, one could not understand the difference between matter and transcendence. But because they take the Lord's body to be within the modes of mature nature, they cannot understand what is matter and what is transcendence. There's no question of them understanding that. So only by your presence you can understand the transcendent nature of your Lordship, who are the controller of mature nature. Your transcendent nature is very difficult to understand unless one is influenced by the presence of the transcendental form. So there's no question of them understanding because they've taken the Lord's avajananti mamudha, that they're fools who have taken the Lord's form to be material. As we read sometimes in Mayavadi's commentary upon the Bhagavad Gita and all that, they consider the Lord, I was impersonal before, now I have become impersonal. And that I take upon this material body. Even the Christians and so on and so forth, different religions, they take even the Lord's material body to be material. The God descends in flesh, and He is flesh, and He is killed. So, whoa, what is your conception of God? Completely material. So they cannot understand Him. Naham prakasha sarvasya. You can't. By this conception of this thing, because you have not differentiated between, you have not understood that the Lord's body is beyond the modes of mature nature, one cannot understand the difference between matter and transcendence. You can see this very prominently within religions. They cannot understand what is matter and what is spirit. Why? Because just they don't consider. They have no conception. They think, well, it's just within this conception, as Vishnu Chaitanya Prabhu was relating yesterday, that within my well, that is all there is. There's nothing more than that. How can there be someone who sleeps, but he's transcendental and he's experiencing great transcendental pleasure from that sleep, as Prahlad Maharaj relates throughout his prayers, that, my Lord, you only come in just to enjoy. You don't come here by force. You come here with your pleasure potency, just to enjoy, my Lord. But people cannot recognize that in 7.9.32. He says, O my Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, after the annihilation, the creative energy is kept in you, who appear to sleep with half-closed eyes. Actually, however, you do not sleep like an ordinary human being, for you are always in a transcendental stage, beyond the creation of the material world, and you feel transcendental bliss. And you always feel transcendental bliss. Prahlad is able to recognize that. Why? He says, because beyond the creation of this material world, you are above the modes of material nature. Prahlad, he is able to recognize that the Lord, he is not sleeping, as also at the end of this translation he says, although you appear to sleep, the sleeping is distinct from the sleeping in ignorance. His sleeping is in bliss. Yoga Nidra, in which he's in transcendental bliss. Because Satchitananda Vigraha, this Lord is Satchitananda. Yad karanarnave jala bhajati sma yoga nidramananta jagadanda saroma kupaha adhara shakti mavalambe param samurtim govinda mahadi purusham tamaham bhajami. That is in this mystic stumbler, he's in this yoga nidra in which he's enjoying. And Srila Prabhupada says in this other verse that I was quoting here that Lord Brahma, in this particular verse, the word Vijnana Ajnana Vidam Parajanam. Vijnana means transcendental knowledge of the Supreme Personality. Vijnana is also experienced. Transcendental knowledge has to be accepted by the descending process of disciplic succession, as Brahma presents the knowledge of Krishna in the Brahma Samhita. Brahma Samhita is Vijnana, as realized by Brahma's transcendental experience. And in that way, he presents the form and the pastimes of Krishna in the transcendental abode. Ajnana Vidya means that which can match all kinds of speculations. In ignorance, people are imagining the form of Lord. Sometimes he has no form and sometimes he has form, according to different imaginations. But the presentation of Krishna in the Brahma Samhita is Vijnana, scientific, experienced knowledge given by Lord Brahma and accepted by Lord Chaitanya. There is no doubt about this. Shri Krishna's form, Shri Krishna's flute, Shri Krishna's color, everything is reality. Here it is said that Vijnana is always defeating all kinds of speculative knowledge. Therefore, the demigods prayed, without you appearing as Krishna, as you are, neither Ajnana Vidya, the essence of speculative knowledge, nor Vijnana would be realized. Ajnana Vidya Pamarjanam. By your appearance, the speculative knowledge of ignorance will be vanquished, and the real experienced knowledge of authorities like Lord Brahma will be established. Men influenced by the three modes of material nature imagine their own God according to the modes of material nature. In this way, God is presented in various ways, but your appearance will establish what the real form of God is. As Srila Prabhupada says, we know God where God lives, we know what God does, we know what God eats. We have his phone number. That by the appearance of Krishna, we can understand. Just like we often make the point that no other religion can establish that, the form of God. The appearance of God, what God actually looks like, how beautiful he is, what he does, what he eats. None of these things are available by the appearance of Krishna, by Krishna coming and descending into this world and displaying in the activities. One can understand clearly. One can dispel all of these disillusion in oneself. All of the speculative knowledge, God may be like that, maybe like this, maybe he likes this, maybe he likes that. No. Krishna gives very clear knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita and then to his devotees like Lord Brahma, Prahlad, in what he likes, in how to perform that devotional service to him. So there is no need for speculation. Prabhupada says, therefore one should accept authority from Lord Brahma, great devotees like Lord Brahma. Why? Because Vijnanam, they have realized this knowledge. It is not just some speculative idea. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam is such the important aspect, is the most important aspect of the Vaishnavas' lives because it presents the pastimes of Lord. And it gives us the understanding by which to serve the Lord and how to come up in devotional service and not have the speculative mentality of who the Lord is. It's a very clear idea in different forms of the Lord, different relations with the Lord, different rasas that are there, in which one can clearly establish one's own relationship with the Lord. It gives us that ability to do that. But the impersonalists, they have no opportunity, practically. They're too much engrossed in this material conception of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as the verses there, ye ne ravindaksha vimuktamaninas toya sta bhavad avishuddha buddhaya aruhya krichena param padam tatha patyanti adho nadhrita yushmad angrahaya. Here, O Lotus Eye Lord, although non-devotees accept severe austerities and penances to achieve the highest position, may think themselves liberated, their intelligence is impure, they fall down from their position of imagined superiority because they have no regard for your lotus feet. They have no understanding. Although they're thinking, I'm doing such a great process, as a Brahmana, I'm doing so many different types of austerities and so many things. Prahlad Maharaj says even one is a Brahmana but he has no attraction for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he's useless. But a dog eater who is attracted towards the Lord and knows how to glorify Him, he can liberate his whole family. But the Brahmana has no ability to liberate anyone. So many of these mental speculators may say so many big philosophies and so many things, but at the core of it, by their practice, there is no realized knowledge actually. It's just dry speculation. Therefore, their pleasure, which there is pleasure there, because to some extent, but it's compared to is a drop or a hoof print of a calf, compared to the ocean of pleasure that is available in devotional service. So, the impersonalists will criticize the archana process, as Prabhupada says here. Because they're thinking, how are you worshipping this deity? What is the point? Is it some material thing? Actually, everything is one. Okay, everything is Brahman. So no need to worship. But for those who can see, for those who have the eyes to bhakti mam abhijanati, those who know by bhakti, they can see the Supreme Personality of Godhead and they have that relationship with Him. It's personal. Waking the Lord up in the morning, putting the Lord to sleep, is personal. It is a relationship with the Lord. And one wakes the Lord up and then offers prayers to the Lord for the pleasure of the Lord. But the impersonalists cannot understand such thing. They think, it's a process, but it's a lower thing. It's archana is there in the Vedas, but it's like ultimately there's no need for such things. So they criticize such positions. So the Mayavadi or the impersonalists or those who have a material conception of God, their destination is unknown, unclear. Just like we have those who are very dedicated in God consciousness, like we are seeing the level of faith of the Christians is so beyond even, dare to say that even most of our devotional society. But because that faith is completely rooted in a material conception of life in which they murder living entities for their own pleasure, their tongue, and they see them separate from Lord's existence. What is their destination? Unknown. How much do they have to suffer for what they've done? When will they be able to come up to the platform of pure devotional service? Unknown. So whether it's an impersonalist or those who are worshipping God in a material conception, their destination is unknown. But for those who are absorbed in the Bhagavad Marg, in worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says one can put a blindfold on and run, because now he's established in that. So even though the devotees of the Lord may not be so scholarly, sometimes, as you may see, may not be fully dedicated even, or fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, but because they are on the path of Krishna consciousness, their destination is known. As Krishna clearly defines it. Even if one doesn't attain perfection within his life, then he shall come into the family of righteous people within the next life and try to perform that process again. He gets that opportunity, clear opportunity to perform that process. For others, we don't know when it's possible again. So this is the situation of such people who cannot understand beyond the modes of material nature. They're influenced by it, they're conditioned by it, and no hope for them to come out of it unless, as Prahlad Maharaj says, they make an endeavor to try to understand. They make an endeavor to try to understand God and not be so stuck in their crazy ideas. Because as being described before, when Krishna appears in this world, all speculative knowledge is gone. When the Srimad Bhagavatam appears into this world, then all these nonsense philosophies are dissipated. They're completely destroyed. But people are attached to their own false egos and their own understandings of life. When one can give that up, then, as our own Acharya is saying, that I can give up sense gratification, then I shall be able to see Vrindavan. Then I shall be able to enter into Vrindavan. Similarly, when one gives up his own bodily conception of life, material conceptions of life, then he can take up devotional service very easily. And that may be invoked by the devotees of the Lord by their mercy, such and such and such, by distribution of Srila Prabhupada's books, establishment of temples and farms and communities, restaurants. All of these different aspects may awaken that in the living entities and give them vijnana. Without even the jnana, they may not even have the knowledge, but they may get vijnana by the mercy of the devotees. So here, that is some of the things being described. I'll end my class there. If there's any questions or comments, please feel free to ask.
So in the beginning of the class, you said that the impersonalist Mayavadis, they're in the mode of goodness, or more in the mode of goodness than sometimes even devotees. But then pretty much immediately later you followed up by saying that the impersonalistic conception gives rise to ignorance, and it's very selfish. People in the mode of ignorance are very selfish. So could you clarify this?
So they're ignorant ultimately of the proper conception of life, of proper conception of the soul and its relationship with Krishna. That is ultimately what, that's what Maya is, ignorance of that relationship. But within their lifestyle that they live, it is very much, you see their, the way they eat, the way they function is very much in the mode of goodness. That like they're very, as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, that all the holes in the body are illuminated. So they eat at a particular time, sleep at a particular time. So in that way, their bodily conception of life is in some level of goodness. But their conception itself of impersonalism is complete ignorance. It's ignorance of the position of the soul. And so you see that Srila Prabhupada describes how sometimes impersonalists or Mayavadis, they come to this level of, okay, everything, neti, everything is impersonal, okay, everything is, it's only Brahman, but because it's not complete, they come back down to the level of bodily conception of life and then perform this work in which it's extended selfishness, go and help this charity, go and help that charity. So there is a level of, in the material conception, there is goodness there, but overall it's in the understanding their position and in their relationship with Krishna is complete ignorance. So does that make any sense?
Because I'm trying to understand how we say that the Mayavadis, you see, they're very selfless, which is why they're doing charitable activities and things like that. Selfless. Uh-huh. Because one of the characteristics of the mode of goodness is that you are actually selfless. It's one of the characteristics of the mode of goodness. Brahmanas said to be in the mode of goodness because they help others. Then I'm trying to understand, because you also gave the example of a child and how a child is selfish. But a philanthropist or specifically the Mayavadi philanthropists, are more than just the regular philanthropists who are in the mode of passion, maybe doing it for name, fame. Mayavadis, some of them are not doing it necessarily for name or fame or anything like that. So how could we compare that with the example of like the child, for instance, that selfishness? That makes sense when you explain the mode of ignorance, but then...
Well, that is some level of extended selfishness. Even this, whatever the Mayavadis do, they may say, well, I'm not doing it for anything, just for the sake of doing it. But they get, otherwise they wouldn't do it, because Guru Maharaj says in a lecture that, why the hell you rascal, everything is nothing, everything is one, why are you now, Srila Prabhupada says that, why you rascal, you coming down, and why are you trying to help people now? Why? Because you get personal satisfaction out of it. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. Because you're already satisfied. If already satisfied as Brahman, everything is Brahman, you're satisfied, then what's the problem? Why you just, it doesn't matter anyways, everybody's God, so what's the use? Why you rascal coming down and helping others? Why? Because they lack that self-satisfaction, and now it's this extended selfishness of getting that satisfaction from others. So it definitely is done in a more renounced way than what a general materialist is, because they cultivate that by their process of Vedic rituals and yoga. Some level of process they may cultivate that. So it is different from a materialist in the sense that, okay, they may not particularly be out for fame, name and fame. Like, who's this yogi that Guru Maharaj often talks about, that he was just in some mountains and he was in Ram Maharishi, but he didn't particularly do philanthropy work. He just didn't do anything. Huh? Who? Huh? Anyways, I guess that example doesn't particularly take precedent. But even that, whatever charity they're performing is also extended selfishness. It's not selfless. You couldn't say that's selfless, because they're not. Ultimately, it's to satisfy themselves.
Sure.
So it is a level of more goodness than passion, because it's done, like I said, in a more renounced way, because they may not be out for name and fame, which is more in the mode of passion. But at the same time, they're completely ignorant of like what it is actually one should do. That they go and do this philanthropy work, but it doesn't get people to relate to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It just, what is it? Well, I'm just doing this nice thing because it makes me feel good. Ultimately, it makes them feel good. So otherwise, they would descend even lower. If that didn't satisfy them, then they go into maybe illicit sex and so many other things. And then you see the Mayavadis who are not satisfied with just performing work that they won't be recognized by. Then they go and become recognized. Then they go philanthropy work in which they are recognized, and then they take on the position of politician and such and such and such. So then there's a degrade from this to this to this. So in some way they're in that mode of goodness, in a level of renunciation, regulation, but because it ultimately centered around self-satisfaction, they consider themselves, as Prabhupada says here, they see everything as an extension of them. Like, this is how the world should be. So it's ultimately ignorance, but it's exhibited in different modes of material nature, in that ignorance. Is that okay? Or? Anything else?
Prabhu, we've all heard this story about devotees in the early days where they're reading Prabhupada's books and said, what is this? Who are the Mayavadis? What is this? Prabhupada's talking about the Mayavadis, and Prabhupada says,
we can find them and beat them up.
Well, that the real impersonalists are, we ourselves are so contaminated, and you're kind of mentioning that, it can influence us even on our devotional society. So in what ways do you feel that you can guard against the impersonalist conception?
As Prabhupada often says that he says this in many places, that one should remain in the association of devotees. And by that association, that should purify one, and to be able to see all the devotees above oneself, to develop that attitude of service. That is the whole point of devotional service. So seeing where we're selfish in our performing devotional service, and then trying to purify that selfishness, So like, that's exhibited even through the standard process of even cooking. And you might want to eat something a particular way, but no, you have to cook a particular way that the devotees may like, or the Supreme Personality Godhead like. So to some extent you're being pushed to renounce your own taste. So sometimes some people like their food really salty, but others may not like that. So you can't do that. Some may like their food very spicy, and even after you tell them, hey, Prabhu, many people are like not like into this, like this is like having bad effects on other devotees. Then one has to give that idea up. But I think this is how it should be. Well, no, it's actually okay. Now you have to give that idea up of how you think it should be, according to obviously rules and regulations of proper understanding. So when one lives within devotional community or society, then naturally the community has to function on this level of selflessness, that with Krishna in the center. So it purifies one. But when one doesn't live in a community, then it's easy to kind of just get into just, okay, well, we have that within so much that, okay, I just cook what I like and offer it to Krishna, even though Krishna may even not even accept that, or may not particularly like that. But anyways, I make it because it's I can offer it to Krishna, but it ultimately satisfies me. So being in association, it keeps one in check, keeps us going from too far, at least, becoming too selfish. It's just like we see that live in devotional society, but that attitude is there. So then we get out of devotional society, and then because that selfishness was not purified, and then it turns into just, no, well, it doesn't even matter what Krishna likes now. I can go to Karmi restaurant and watch a movie and eat Karmi grains and offer that to Krishna. Whatever some Karmi cooked and put it on my plate, okay, Hare Krishna, and then take that. Because it's ultimately about my satisfaction. Whereas within devotional community, you can't do that. You got to take what's being cooked. But there's of course room for that within different ashrams. But yeah, living within a devotional community definitely purifies that aspect of it. Anything else?
Hare Krishna. You're mentioning in your class that Bhakti Vikas Maharaj was saying that he's something along the lines of like trying to build a family, not a business. So can you elaborate on that some?
Yeah, is that our transactions, even within devotional community, it shouldn't be motivated by trying to make a profit. So just like one may be doing a particular service, but he may be trying to get something out of it. Like one should generally, idea is that one lives in such a way that he's getting enough for himself, and then rest of it that he's performing service for the Lord, or performing service to the devotees. But it's sometimes seen that devotees try to extract more out of others. In this case, it wasn't exactly like that, but it was just the principle that Maharaj was explaining, that we should function as a family, seeing that not that we're trying to get something, like trying to take something from each other, but trying to assist each other in the service. So it should be seen that ultimately that it's not like, okay, here's like, okay, for example, like here's like a book trust, and then here's like the distributors. It's not that the book trust is trying to take as much as possible and, take as much as possible and give as little as possible. And try to just unnecessarily put the price up in order to just make a profit. But it should give, okay, whatever we get it for, as long as, everybody who's working a job is working that has to be maintained, of course. But it's given with that idea of, okay, this is for Srila Prabhupada's distribution, for Srila Prabhupada's pleasure, and not trying to attach like the idea of, trying to make this big profit out of it. So similarly, like we see this in Homestead Heritage kind of has that, seems to have that culture of where it treats everybody as kind of a family. They have enough to maintain, but anything excessive of what is not required for themselves, they like assist others and like allow others to take take jobs that they could take and make so much money from, but they don't try to take that job. They just like hand it to others. And so it works as a family, not as a profit business, but as a way of like maintaining everyone and having the ability for everybody to actually function properly in devotional service without straining. Just like if the book trust puts money, all of a sudden, like, it makes the price of the books way more than it needs to be, then the book distributors have to strain more on the street to try to get more books of Srila Prabhupada's out there. And so then people start straining because of one person not understanding, hey, it's like, all right, it should just be what is required, but trying to do more than that. So it should just be seen that that's what Prabhupada, simple living, higher thinking, that we should try to live simple lives in which we don't try to acquire more than we need. So that maintains the principle of like family, hopefully. It doesn't get us into the greedy mentality. So that seems to be more the idea, that we try to assist each other in the best way we can. We work together, and not without any selfish desires to become or accumulate more than we need. Is there anything else? Anything from the Matajis? Yes.
I had a question about religionists, and so the conception that they have is impersonal, and there's places where Prabhupada says that one can reach love of God within Christianity and so forth, but if they are, in the rare case that they actually have the sincerity to do that without meat eating and everything, what Ras do they actually reach? Do they only reach Santarash, or does, by Krishna's mercy, he carries what they lack and preserves what they have, and they can go to one of the higher rasas because they have an impersonal conception of the Lord?
There's many different things that Prabhupada said about that, but if they are somewhat sincere, and they are sincere, and you can, and they follow some level of process properly, in which they may even stop meat eating and such, they may be granted another life in which they can take up Krishna consciousness. It doesn't seem the case that they'll attain a particular rasa in the spiritual world with the Lord, because that's quite a high thing. It's not a cheap thing. So, because it does require a Vedic process. It does have to be under the realm of what the Lord is asking. Satam Kirtan Dhamam, you chant the names of God, and they're doing that, but specifically direct process of Krishna consciousness, recognizing the Lord and their relationship with the Lord. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur comments in the 11th canto that these other religions is like a dream within a dream. So although they're not like the atheist, or particularly maybe even the Mayavadis, but because their practice and their conception is not rooted in reality of the Vedas, then it's still like just waking up in a dream, and he's still dreaming. So they may be able to wake up out of their dreaming state, and so in the next life, if they're sincere and they're not performing sinful activities and they're very dedicated to God, they may get a position in which now they can take up Krishna consciousness seriously and have the opportunity to have that different, the rasas that are there with the Lord. It's quite a high thing. It's not a cheap thing. So even within devotional stuff, it's hard. Like even us, is for who are in the process and who are trying for it, to attain that rasa, it's not a cheap thing. We know it's not a cheap thing. So the Aishwarya Bhav is there from them, but that still needs to be rooted within Vedic culture, within understanding and studying of the Vedas and understanding the proper conception of the Lord. So it has to be a bona fide process. So they may be able to get that position in which they can perform that bona fide process by their sincerity and by their desire to love God. They're never lost in that. We see that they're so determined in their faith. It's quite impressive. It's like there's definitely reciprocation there. We've noticed from Krishna in different ways, just because of their devotion and their dedication, but they're misguided. So then they might be guided in the proper way in the next life. Yeah. Anything else? Okay, Mataji. And then
So there was this article that the Matajis we had read together. It's an article written for the 50th anniversary of ISKCON. It's called "To Love Is to Cooperate." So there's a few
Called
quotes.
what?
To love is to cooperate.
to love is to cooperate. Yeah.
So there's a few quotes in there that I just wanted to read, and maybe then you could just explain why some of the points you made in your class don't contradict these statements. So it's this isn't a quote from Prabhupada. This is just like the subheading for it. A couple of years after Prabhupada had formed the GBC, one of its members wrote to complain that impersonal dealings were dividing the devotees. Prabhupada disagreed. This is what Prabhupada said. It is not so much so that because there may be faults in our God brothers and God sisters, or because there may be some mismanagement or lack of cooperation, that this is due to being impersonalist. No, it is the nature of the living condition to always have some fault. And then, so we shall not expect that anywhere there is any utopia, rather that it is impersonalism. People should not expect that even in the Krishna consciousness society there will be utopia. Because devotees are persons, therefore there will always be some lacking. But the difference is that their lackings have become transcendental, because despite everything they may do, their topmost intention is to serve Krishna. And then there's, I think you get the gist of it, yeah.
Yeah, that, I mean, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, so you had, maybe I misunderstood, but it had seemed like someone could take away that because of a lack of cooperation amongst devotees, it's a form of their impersonalism. Because that was actually a conception that I had prior to reading this article myself. So if you could just explain why that point, or if I misunderstood that point, how that's not contradicting what Prabhupada's
saying that it's not particularly impersonalism that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not that we've become impersonalists because, we ourselves, there's still person, but the inability to recognize, like Prabhupada says there, the fault of the living entity is there. So that fault is particularly inability to recognize how we're all working for Krishna. So that level of not recognizing is, that you could say in one sense, a different level of not impersonalism. It's not that it's impersonalism, but just not becoming fully cognizant of our situation with Krishna. So it's not that it's impersonal, it's not particularly impersonalism in that sense, but it's just our inability to recognize our relationship with the Lord and the devotees. So, yeah, it can be taken in many different ways. But yeah, that may be the fault of the living entity, that we're not particularly recognition of our particular relationship with the Lord and how that is eternally existing, and therefore we have existential crisis, and so then there's so many problems that come about from that. So they may be taken in many different ways. It may not just be like a one straight thing, as being said there. Yeah. Anything else? I got 2 minutes.
Just speaking about family, we may have family members, or we may have close friends, or there may be neighboring temples or something like this, where we don't see things eye to eye, or
Sure.
we think things should be done in a certain way. It may be completely completely backed up with logic and reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just give an example. Maybe someone has a younger sibling who's completely just getting into drugs and just ruining their life. Like, what are you doing with yourself? You should be like me. I got good grades, I'm doing this and that, so you should be like me. And there may be, anyways, there should be some loving cooperation there, but at the same time, you need to distinguish what's right from what's wrong, while not getting an us and them mentality. For instance, a neighboring temple, I mean, different temples in our society don't do things the same, don't see eye to eye on how things should be done. But it's not that we should see each other as enemies, but like
Yeah,
still see like the bigger picture, like, okay, we're devotees, we're trying to do things the right way.
yeah.
I know, I just see,
There's transcendental variety.
yeah.
Even in the spiritual world, that's there. That one devotee argues to that this is the better way to serve the Lord, and the other one may argue this is the better way to serve the Lord. So there is transcendental variety. You got to come to the platform of a little more transcendence there. But yeah, there's definitely different ways to serve the Lord, and both devotees may be like they're eagerness to serve the Lord in different ways. But at the same time, at the core, there's understanding that he's a devotee. There's an enmity in our core. There isn't a feeling of like enmity. There's like ultimately, there may be, you'll see devotees sometimes argue, but when they leave that scene, they understand, okay, all right, he's a devotee and we're a devotee, and then we have a different way of serving the Lord. So that may be like that also, yeah.
Regarding what Mataji said and what she read, the point is that it's not impersonal when devotees disagree or maybe not see each other's viewpoints or cooperate if the ultimate motivation with each devotee, even though there may be a difference of perception, is to serve Krishna. However, if that's not the case, then it is impersonal. So that is affecting, because then it is selfishness. But it is understood that in Krishna consciousness there can be different perspectives on how to serve Krishna, and all of those perspectives are selfless. One devotee may prefer one perspective, another devotee may prefer another perspective, and there may be difference because of that. And that is what Prabhupada is referring to, that it doesn't mean that because one doesn't agree with one's perspective, one has become impersonal. Yet, one has to be careful, especially those who are sadhakas, because the line between what we think is selfless and what is selfish is very easily blurred. And if one is very confident that one's desire, motivation, and cause of non-cooperation, which is, an actual thing, is due to desire to serve Krishna, then okay, one is safe and one is protected. Especially if one can validate that with senior Vaishnavas or the spiritual master. Yeah.
Even amongst that disagreement, the service will never stop. If it would be impersonal.
Yeah, the service won't stop. That's also
it would
there.
be those two devotees, even though they disagree, they'll never allow the service to stop.
Yeah.
So, but if as a result of that argument, there is no more service, that means it became impersonal.
There may be some high emotions here and there
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all that, but
Okay, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.